All right, folks, by USC standards, the defensive front is in shambles. So that means linebackers to the rescue. We bring in Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles to help us break down the Trojans at linebacker. And it all starts, Nick, with Cam Smith, who was off to an extremely special season. Just read that he was on pace to lead USC as a freshman in tackles. And that would have been the only time that that's ever been done since they've been keeping tackle statistics in 1954. So he's off to a pretty legendary start to his career.
Yeah, Cam Smith. I don't know if there's, on defense anyway, a player with higher expectations than Cam Smith. Dory Jackson maybe, but maybe Biggie Marshall. But Cam Smith, just what he did his first year was insane. He was, I think, one of the few bright spots on that USC defense last season, perhaps one of the few on the entire team. I think the first time I think most of the world probably heard of him was USC Utah. That was the famous game where he had 3 interceptions in that game. One of them was a pick 6. Just did insane things. A lot of excitement for a year that was supposed to be all about Sua Cravens on defense. Cam Smith, you knew his name. And now he's coming back as a sophomore. Expectations are sky high for that guy. He certainly seems to have the talent to do that. The defensive scheme is much better suited for not only his talents, but a lot of guys on that USC defense. So, yeah, the expectations are sky high. I think he can probably meet them, but Cam Smith this year really has the opportunity to just kind of take over the world.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so it's going to be up to see, A, keep him healthy, and then B, see what he can do. Just let him go, and it's going to be exciting to watch.
So despite the presence of Cam Smith on the inside, USC also thought it the best move to take Uchenna Nwosu and move him to the inside prior to spring practice. He was a pretty productive player. There's a number of guys here on the inside that provide depth, Nick. They're not star players. Maybe they will be. Maybe they'll break out. Olajuwon, Tucker, Michael Hutchings, guys that have produced in the games that they've played, but they're not star players. They're not household names.
Yeah, and a lot of I think the key word to tack on to the end of that is yet. I think a lot of these guys you could be hearing their name quite a bit, especially because, as you said, the defensive line could really struggle this year, especially in the month of September. But I think a lot of these guys are talented. A lot of them got starts. A lot of them, I think, you just sort of didn't hear about them because they were in a position unit with Sua Cravens, who just went to the NFL, I believe is a 2nd-round pick, and then Cam Smith, who I just raved about for a good 5 minutes just now. When you're playing behind that, it's a little tough to get noticed, especially in a year where if you're talking about USC, you're talking about a new coach, firing the old coach, that guy, this guy, and so it's a little tough to get your name out there. But a lot of these guys had 1 or 2 starts last year. A lot of them had a lot of good reps last season, so there's a lot of experience. And again, Clancy Pendergrass's 5-2 defensive scheme, there's a lot of shuffling around of linebackers because sometimes it's a 5-2, sometimes it's a 4-3, sometimes it's a nickel. So having a lot of choices and talent at linebacker, even if you don't have a lot of household names, is going to be important. Because some snaps they're going to need 2 linebackers and a linebacker who can also play D-line. Sometimes they might need up to 5 linebackers on the play. It requires a lot of versatility, but it's a very simple scheme. So a lot of these guys, all they have to do is know where their gap is on that play and smash into it and take up that hole or make the tackle if they're coming your way. So a lot of these guys you won't have heard of yet, but I think the scheme is poised for all of these guys, Uchenna and everybody, shuffle them around, see where they work best in what slot, because there's a ton of slots at linebacker. See who works well, and then I think you're going to hear of a lot of these guys a lot more often. That is, if Cam Smith doesn't take over the world, and he's the only one you talk about. But it's an exciting time to be a USC linebacker, I think.
Yeah, and the numbers obviously can be very misleading, especially on defense when you start to look this over. But just kind of prorate this when you look at a guy like Tucker. 3 starts. That's it. 8 games played. So USC played 14 games. So he missed almost half the games, only played 8 of 14, 40 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. So, he continues to emerge and continues to improve. He's going to double those numbers. We mentioned Nwosu. He had 31 total tackles last year. Quentin Powell had 12 stops. And now we move to the outside. And who do we have out there at the outside linebacking position?
Well, they've got coming out, they've got Porter Gustin is looking very sharp, very exciting. You've also got Osa Masina, who I think 2 guys that, again, you haven't heard of. Osa Masina has the ideal size for the strong outside linebacker spot, but he was stuck behind Uchenna, but Uchenna, they moved inside, and I think that's partially because Osa Masina is looking very strong in spring practice, so they're kind of doubling up, getting use out of both guys instead of just swapping them in and out in the same position. So another guy that I think who isn't going to probably play outside, but he could, is Quentin Powell. He has the ability. He has great east-west speed. So he's one of those guys that you can put him into just about any gap you want. So he could move around quite a bit. Quentin Powell could on this 5-2 defensive scheme. So it's honestly right now it's tough to say if he's an inside or outside linebacker, but Quentin Powell could be the breakout star on this defense. We all know what Cam Smith's capable of, but Quentin Powell's another guy you haven't heard of, but he could just be everywhere next year, and it's really exciting to see what Quentin Powell could do.
So, Nick, while you give us the real analysis, I'm trying to support you with the numbers here. And what really pops out to me here is when I look at Gustin's numbers, only had 25 tackles, which is pretty understandable considering limited playing time. But for a linebacker with 25 tackles to have 7 of those tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks, that's a lot of big plays for a kid that got 25 tackles, where more than half of them are in the opponent's backfield.
Yeah, and here's the emphasis this season. Last year, the emphasis was not on blitzing or penetrating the O-line. Last year was just sort of making sure you're in the right spot to meet the ball carrier. This year, probably every single step of the way, the emphasis has been on play on their side of the ball, their side of the ball, their side of the ball. So those numbers, which again, half this guy's tackles were on the right side of the line. If you're USC, that was with de-emphasizing it. It's going to be very interesting to see how good these guys can swarm and play on the offensive side of the ball when it's been drilled in their head, snap after snap after snap, all spring long, and they're going to do it again in August. So this could be a linebacker core that swarms and is very stifling and downright oppressive, which is good. I think they're going to have to be while the D-line catches up and gets up to speed. But it's an exciting time for this linebacker core. I really want to see what these guys can do.
Well, when we talk USC football, we got to go to Nick Dempsey, Conquest Chronicles. Nick, we appreciate the breakdown.
Awesome. Anytime, Mark.